Microphone test, 1, 2, 3.
Hello, everybody. We're going to get the Built Heritage Committee going, and thank you all for coming today. Thank you, committee members, and welcome, Councillor Kadri. Okay. Anybody have any declarations of interest? Vice Chair Podolsky.
On the application to alter 10 Rideau, I will be declaring interest.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Confirmation of minutes? Carried? Thank you. Okay, so first of all, we have a couple of items that I want to bring to your attention that we have to add, or we can add if you approve adding them to the agenda. The first one is time sensitive. It's an update on the property standards bylaw amendment. It's a staff presentation just for less than 5 minutes. We have Linda Anderson, who's our general manager, chief bylaw manager for the city. And if you recall, we had a presentation. The bylaw department was kind enough to include us with their initial presentation prior going to Community and Protective Services about the derelict buildings, etc. So this is an update. They are going back to the Built Heritage, to the Community and Protective Services, I think September 19th or something like that. So it is time sensitive. Do we agree to add that to the agenda and have that on first? Okay. So the motion would be to provide information to the subcommittee prior to the report presented to Community and Protective Services on September the 19th. Is that carried? Yes. Thank you. And then the other item, which is also time sensitive, that staff have brought to our attention, which isn't on the agenda, is the demolition of 173 Huntmar Drive. And so this is so that Ms. Coots can give us information on it. And again, it's time sensitive. Does the committee, first of all, have to waive the rules? Did I say that the last time? Because you have to waive the rules for both of them. Carried? Okay, so on this one, the demolition of 173 Huntmar Drive, as it is necessary to meet deadlines set by the Building Code Act as the property is not designated or protected. So, agreed? We'll put that on. So that will become the new 9. Okay? All right, so back to the agenda as we knew it. The application to alter 106, 116 Spark Street. Who's moving that? Where's the motion? Okay, so I'm going to ask our Vice Chair, Barry Podolsky, to move deferral of that item.
So moved.
Thank you. Does anyone need to have more information as to why? It's going to be deferred to the October 10th meeting. It's the motion to defer, moved by Vice Chair Podolsky to the October 10th meeting of the Built Heritage. Did you want to say something, Ms. Coots?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. We are waiting for further information from the applicant confirming I asked for a signed copy of a amended agreement allowing a new approach to the retention or to the front facade, and until we have a copy of an agreement signed between the NCC and the developer, that will not be in front of committee. They did tell me they may not have everything ready and into me in time for October the 10th, in which case it would be November the 14th. Thank you.
Thanks for that information. So, committee, are you on deferral? Carried? Thank you. The second item that we have a speaker who is here to speak in favor, and so we'll be holding that. And that is the application to demolish 23.5 St. Andrew Street. It's a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District. The number 3, I guess the new 4, is application to alter 410 Wood Avenue, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Rockcliffe Park Heritage Conservation District. Does anyone want to hold that? Carried? Thank you. Okay. the designation of the Alexander Fleck House, 593 Laurier Avenue West, under Part 4 of the Ontario.
We have 2 speakers on this item.
Okay. We have 2 speakers on this item, and there will be, and are they opposed? They both agree. However, we do have a motion to defer this item moved by Vice Chair Podolsky, so we will come back to that, because these people may want to speak to deferral. Okay, so we'll hold that, come back to it. Oh, it's a wrong one, sorry. I thought that's why you had it.
You're reading the 306.
No, I thought you gave that to me for that. Okay, we don't have anybody speaking to it. So on the motion to defer, anyone have a problem with deferral? Why are we deferring?
At the request of the property owner, there was something came up and they could not, a family matter came up and they could not make it to the meeting.
They had to be out of town, and they asked. Okay, we're good with that? And it doesn't violate our timing at all under the,
There's no timing for designations under the Act.
good. Okay, so we're good? Deferral is carried?
So this is,
Hang on a second, because our committee coordinator here is trying to get my attention.
to go back to item number 306. So it's here, because
And they
you
were-
jumped right to number 5.
Okay.
So,
No, I carried that one, actually. That's why it's got the check. Okay, so back on application to alter the Hungarian embassy, we have 2 people who are speaking in favor of it. We had carried it. I didn't know we had the 2 speakers. So what I'm saying is, to the people, Mr. Simister and Mr. Carson, if committee carries this, since you're in support, do you still need to speak? Where are you? Mr. Carson? Okay, both of you agree to that? Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Okay. So, is it carried again? Yes. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. All right. The application to alter 429 McLaren Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Centertown Heritage Conservation District. We have some comments that were sent. We have nobody registered to speak. Anybody on the committee? No? Is that carried? Carried, thank you. The designation of the Charles Billings House at 187 Billings Avenue under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. We have no one to speak. We did get some written correspondence. Anyone want to hold that? No? Is that carried? Thank you. Okay. And then we come up to the item that Vice Chair Podolsky has declared a conflict of interest on. Do we have any speakers on this? We have no speakers on this. Can you just back up for a minute? So if we have to hold it, we'll hold it. But if you would, thank you. Remove yourself from our presence. Okay, so the application to alter the transportation building at 10 Rideau Street, a property designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Is that therefore carried? And noting that our Vice Chair left due to his conflict of interest. Okay, thank you. So now we could ask our Vice Chair. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Harder. I was under the impression that we were also deferring the St. Andrew property pending further information from the applicant. It was discussed at agenda clearing.
I don't recall that.
We asked for an engineering report regarding the demolition.
Okay, well, we have a speaker, so we're going to.
Okay, I
that's
just,
held. That item is held? Okay. All right. So we'll ask Ms. Anderson to come back, to come up here, Linda, and give us your update. Thank you.
Good morning. We want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to update you on the heritage aspects of the vacant building strategy. You may recall our presentation in early April, wherein we provided an overview of the strategy as it related to heritage properties. The vacant building strategy was approved by the Community and Protective Services Committee and then Council thereafter. We had made a commitment to update the Built Heritage Subcommittee on any relevant proposals that emanated from this strategy. New mechanisms to address vacant buildings were proposed for review and/or potential considerations. Included was the potential to develop and enforce, through bylaw provisions, specific standards pursuant to the Ontario Heritage Act for maintenance and repair of heritage buildings. If such bylaw provisions are enacted, orders issued with respect to heritage buildings could include these specific standards. Staff is proposing that a separate section or part related specifically to heritage properties to outline the requirements to ensure the maintenance of heritage features be incorporated into our property standards bylaw. In addition to incorporation of the required definitions from the Ontario Heritage Act, the requirements would include minimum standards such as to maintain, preserve, and protect the heritage attributes so as to maintain the heritage character, visual and structural heritage integrity of the building or structure. It would require the repair and/or replacement of heritage properties so as to minimize damage to the heritage values and attributes of the property and to maintain the design, color, texture, grain, or other distinctive features of the heritage attribute. In the case of vacant or damaged heritage properties, protection of the building and property against the risk of fire, storm, neglect, intentional damage, or damage by other causes by effectively preventing the entrance to all animals and unauthorized persons, and by closing and securing openings to buildings with boarding, with specific standards and in a manner that minimizes the visual impact of that boarding. We will be moving forward to CPS committee on our proposed amendments on September the 19th and then on to council. So we are in the process right now of completing the consultations with various interested parties, including this committee. And that is the total of my presentation, and we're open for questions.
Ms. Anderson, Barry Podolsky, my first question is the identification of the properties on this are deemed to be the heritage properties. This includes properties within the Part 5 heritage districts and Part 4 designations. I suggest that we'd be very interested to have the properties that are on the heritage reference list added to the list of properties that are subject to this condition. The reason for that is that properties that come from the heritage reference list then proceed on from time to time to this committee and council for designation, but it's related to the capability, the capacity of the heritage staff to bring them forward. So I suggest that consideration be given to looking at the heritage reference list as well as the properties that are designated under Part 4 or Part 5. I have a second, Madam Chair, I have a second point, and it's a question about how this is going to be implemented. Will it be just fielding complaints from neighbors, or will the staff proactively go out and visit the properties to examine their condition through a program that is, I guess, where the resources are actually applied by the city? because that's an important thing. So I would like that question answered.
So I'll answer your second question first, if that's all right. We've already begun a proactive enforcement of particularly vacant buildings in the city generally. We have over 100 on the list now. We will continue to pursue proactive enforcement of with properties in the city that are vacant and becoming, even if they're not currently derelict, we'll be keeping an eye on them. As to any heritage properties that are currently inhabited, we'll be reliant upon people such as Sally to advise us if there's something that needs to be done or they perceive it's problematic. The issue we have with properties that are on the heritage reference list is that they're not covered. I just double-checked. They're not covered under the Ontario Heritage Act. So our ability to impose requirements that they maintain heritage attributes is, we'll double check with legal, but we don't think we have the legal authority under the Ontario Heritage Act to impose that. We can certainly ensure that they're maintained, but whether or not we can require that they're maintained to the heritage attributes, we'll have to double check with legal on that.
Follow-up question. I think that some examples will illustrate what I have in mind. Even though you may not be able to enforce the maintenance of the heritage attributes, you certainly can maintain the structural condition of the building. And I'll give you two examples. One is the Booth Board Mill, which is on Shortier Island. It has been known for decades that this building has been deteriorating, and would you proactively, as your part of your program, actually go up and inspect that building now? The second ones would be, for example, the vacant Enercan Booth Street complex, which is not designated by the City of Ottawa. So these are just a couple of examples of prominent landmarks in the city that may be suffering demolition by neglect and are in that in that state where they're not designated but are candidates for designation. And so I think that these are the buildings that, and there may be more of them, that need to be aggressively addressed in order to ensure that they don't suffer neglect through demolition. I mean, had this inspection been done of the Spark Street property, which was vacant, that is now before us, there might have been some letters to the NCC in time. So I think that's the challenge, not just the small residential properties that make the headlines, but the ones that may be owned by institutions or other agencies that should be carrying out their stewardship.
Fair enough.
Yep. And Sally, did you want to comment on that too? Because this isn't the first time that, in particular, the building on Chaudière, at Chaudière has been brought up. I think board member, committee member, Councillor Hobbs has at this committee, and I think at Planning Committee as well. So how do we handle that? Because really, I guess the question is, why are they not designated? And secondly, is that something we should be looking at in order to have that, if that's our only way of caring for them with the new tool that we're going to have at our disposal?
With regards to property standards inspections of the Booth Board Mill, I will defer to my colleagues in property standards, but in terms of the designation, there's certainly The city has been in close contact with Domtar over the years about their buildings, and also about and with the potential new purchasers who were announced in August, and we will be moving forward with the designation of buildings on the Chaudière complex as time progresses. We have begun the work. It's well underway.
That's good news. Member Quinn?
It's just a point of clarification. When you had the slide up talking about, in reference to vacant buildings, you talked a lot about moving forward with securing them, but there wasn't, unless I missed it, any specific mention to some level of maintenance of those buildings as well, as apart from just securing them, boarding them up, etc. Did I miss it, or?
Good point. We will be requiring maintenance of the exterior of the building. We already are moving forward right now in our proactive program. And we will be creating a specific section entitled Vacant Buildings, and then we'll have a section for heritage for all of the buildings. We will be requiring a minimum standard on the exterior of the building, which in the past we have not enforced on vacant buildings, so we're playing catch-up. But this is what we're requiring. And our hope is, part of it, well, it's twofold. Number one, we want to get every building in the city, vacant or inhabited, up to a minimum standard. That means the roof is in good repair, the paint's done, the steps are in good order, all of those kinds of issues. For some buildings that are non-heritage or even heritage ones, doing that amount of work on a building that's been left to deteriorate for a while gets the attention of the owner of the building. So if their intention is to redevelop the property in some way, our hope is by requiring them to bring it up to a standard, it will speed up the process by the owner to move forward doing something with the property. Up until the present time, there has been no very little negative impact to the owner to just let the building sit there empty. Now, there will be a requirement to maintain it for all buildings.
Okay. Is there any way that that could be added to the clause dealing with heritage buildings, as well as securing?
It will be in the bylaw.
It will be. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Smallwood. Hi. With respect to heritage buildings, you said a minimum standard would be maintained or expected to be maintained. Would that include heating systems? One of the things that causes an awful lot of damage to any vacant building is when the heating system is turned off and the water isn't drained, and if it's a hot water heating system, the rads will explode and the water pipes will explode and do substantial damage to the inside of the building. So I'm wondering whether or not you would either A, insist that a level of heat be maintained, or B, that the water systems, heating and plumbing systems be drained in the building in the event that there isn't any heat. Thank you.
I'm going to defer to Ms. Coots on the heating issue, because we originally started out thinking that may be something we wanted to have as a requirement. In consultation with the Heritage Coordinator, we since have come to a different understanding. So, if possible, I'd like Sally to answer that.
This is a complicated issue. Some cities do require the heat to be turned on, and we analyzed it, and analyzed causes of damage to abandoned buildings, and many have been burnt by propane furnaces. For example, 520 the driveway, and I think there's another noteworthy one that the original heating was stripped out, and then the building was heated with another system, and it burnt down. So we feel that a properly, and I think your point is very well taken, it is water damage, but a properly drained system and an unheated building is viable and easier to enforce, because you can't, the question of enforcement of, you'd have to have an inspector going by to see frost on the window, it becomes very complicated. So we, in the end, decided that it was unenforceable to try to heat, but there were ways of ensuring, we hope, that buildings won't be damaged by water.
I'd just like to confirm then, so that the requirement will be that the plumbing systems be shut off and drained, and the heating systems, the radiators, will be shut off and drained.
Correct, it will be.
Thank you.
Good point. Vice Chair Podolsky?
I'd like to just continue this discussion on the heating of buildings, or the temporary heating of buildings. I think that there are some cases in the City of Ottawa of 2 buildings under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act that suffered demolition one of them suffered neglect, serious neglect, and the other one also suffered serious neglect for the reason that the heating was not kept on. And I'm familiar with, and Sandy is familiar with one of them at least. I think that I would like to see consideration being given to this this procedure to allow the city to include the power to enforce heating if special structural consultants or building envelope consultants are brought on board to advise that that is a technique that would be salutary for the protection of the building. So rather than just abandon that option completely, I would leave it to the discretion to keep it in, but have the staff use technical advice to allow that to be enforced as well. So that's the first point. The 2 buildings, one is the École Gig School that would have benefited from having been heated as well as protected from rainwater coming in, because the foundations were affected, and we were the architects that had to spend a lot more money to restore that building because of the neglect by the Catholic School Board. The second one is one that Sandy knows, and that's the Panay House. The Panay House, the new owners did not heat the building. They did not drain the hot water system or the sanitary system, and all of the heating system froze and broke and destroyed much of the interior of the building, as well as the lack of heat affected the ornamental plaster in the building that then had to be replaced. So I think that if we're going to go this route, we should really be pretty vigorous about it, and I recommend that you reconsider that particular procedure and add it to the process. Madam Chair, I have one other question. You spoke about all buildings, all vacant buildings, and my question is, does the city have a record now of all vacant buildings in the city, including those that are designated heritage? I'd like to actually have the list today.
Our list started out at less than 40. We are now at least 100. Sorry, excuse me. Based on people reporting vacant buildings. If we don't have every single one, we're very close. And that includes all the heritage ones. We've actually got on our flow chart that we're keeping for this project, we've actually got a column that designates heritage or not. But of course, as you know, we have to deal with the heritage ones differently. I think we're pretty confident that we've captured most of the vacant buildings in the city. Certainly, what we have captured are the vacant buildings in the city that have been a thorn in the side of residents for many years. Those ones are certainly on the list.
As my last remark, as a test of your list, do you have the former U.S. Embassy on Wellington Street on your list as a vacant building? It's one of the most obvious vacant buildings that has been reported often in the Ottawa Citizen and the Globe and Mail over the last 5 or 6 years, and I'm just curious whether or not that's been brought to your attention.
No, we do not, but we will put it on the list now.
Thank you.
So may I ask that if we can have a copy of the list of the people who are the citizen members of the subcommittee? Is that available, or is this private?
We've been advised by legal that we should not be distributing the list. However, any member that wants to send us information or call us and ask if something's on the list, or just send an email to us to say, can you put this on the list, we'll respond yes or no, it's on the list. That's the way we've been handling it.
Yeah. It just seems to me to be a lot more onerous that way, because the 3 people that we have are citizen members, and likely Councillor Clark, probably, from the area he represents and the length of time he's been representing it, it would be advantageous to the city were they to perhaps not have a copy, but be privy to, if they wanted to coming into your office and having a look at it, just because we want to make sure that we have. And clearly, you know, you think you're very close, but I would suggest that these people could put you a lot closer on the heritage side of it anyway. So, and maybe our legal could make a comment. Sorry to catch you off guard, but do you...
That's fine. I think that in terms of the reasons why the committee would like to have access to the list versus the reasons why it would not be advantageous at this time to distribute it are 2 separate issues. And so I think that if the committee members wish to have a discussion with bylaw about what is and what is not on the list, I don't see that there's an issue with that at this time as part of the committee's business.
Yeah, and so we're not moving a motion or anything like that. This would just be, I think it would be advantageous, as I said, to use the skills on this committee to make sure that that piece, which is the reason you're here today to talk to us, the heritage people, not even looking for a copy of it. And I don't know that they'd be interested in doing that, but I'm thinking probably that they would. Maybe we can take that away and just make sure that it would be...
Here's what I can offer for sure. We can certainly take off of this list, which has much other information on it. We can make a list of all the properties, all the addresses, and through the committee coordinator, we can send it and it can be distributed. So we'll get you a list of every address that's on the list, and that can be distributed. It's the other information that was problematic. So the actual address, not a problem. We'll get that out to you. That fair?
That's good? Okay. As it turns out, we now have a speaker, so now I'm thinking to myself, I shouldn't have bumped you to the front, because other people that came in a certain order, including Ms. Francine Houle, who came to speak, are now half an hour back.
Well, I'm not going to take up much of the half hour. I'm pleased to see that we'll get this list. Basically, what I would like to have it for, so that if it needs supplementation, we can supplement it with additional addresses.
That would be the only purpose, and I'm not asking for it to come to committee. I'm just asking that it for those that are interested, and perhaps what you could do, show of hands for those people that would like to see parts of it. The people that I thought, plus Councillor Clark, correct? All right. Thank you very much. So we do have Ms. Linda Hode wants to speak to vacant buildings. So just stay there for a sec. A ghost, yeah. There is a ghost in here, actually. Haunts, yeah.
Thank you and good morning. I have actually two questions. The first has to do with the Heritage Register.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
and you do know this because you've come to committees for years, really we don't normally have the public come up and ask questions. So if you can work with me into making it a presentation and say da-da-da-da,
Okay.
and then we can have staff comment on it. Thank you.
You may not be aware that as a result of the Hintonburg or the West Wellington Community Design Plan, a number of buildings that are not designated but were on the reference list were transferred to the Heritage Register. So I would be interested to know whether, in fact, these buildings, and I believe this has happened in some other cases as well, will be included and protected under the new proposed bylaw. And I guess I'll just tell you my second issue. Recently, we become aware of a developer who is proposing a development in Hintonburg, and of course there are several proposed along Parkdale Avenue in Mechanicsville, where the buildings have been vacated of tenants and what I'm suggesting is that this may become a greater problem because we have so much intensification going on in neighborhoods, I think particularly of Dalhousie and Hintonburg. Downtown, Centertown developments so far, or intensification, has been happening on parking lots, which means we aren't losing buildings. However, in Hintonburg there are two. I believe one was added to the list, 250, 252 Parkdale, but the building immediately south of it, which would be, I think, in the 260s, has since also been vacated, and the owner owns half a block. And we're very concerned about this. So I guess I'm suggesting to you that your list of buildings could easily expand quite rapidly as developments are proposed. Unless they have a building permit, of course, they cannot demolish these buildings. And they won't be getting their building permit, I suspect, for some time because I don't think they're going to build the buildings, given the number that have been approved. So we foresee in Hintonburg, and it's something we've been discussing, an increase in the number of vacant buildings, and of course we will be referring them to bylaw as they arise. But I just thought you should be aware of that.
That's a good point, even though those two that you mentioned are not heritage designated. But I think that's a different aspect, too, that certainly I hadn't thought about. And in your neck of the woods, certainly I'm sure Councillor Hobbs would be, yeah, but as far as them becoming on the list as vacant to watch, we appreciate the heads up on that.
I could also bring this up at the Community and Protective Services Committee because that's probably more appropriate.
Absolutely. Thanks very much. I think that is all good. So that's received. Thank you very much for coming. Okay. And so we're going on to the application to demolish 23.5 St. Andrew Street, a property designated under Part 5 of the Ontario Heritage Act and located in the Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District. So I don't know if the committee wants a presentation on this. As I did mention at the beginning, there is a piece of information that's missing for us really to make this decision, and that would be an engineering report that says that it must be demolished. And so I would be looking for a motion to defer, but I am going to ask our speaker, our delegation who has signed up to speak, to come and speak today to us. So your thoughts on that?
Just also like to know, this seems to be a classic case of demolition by neglect. So I think not just an engineering report saying that it has to be, but some indication as to why it's fallen into the state that it has. Thank you.
Right, and so that's exactly why we're taking the time, because what was coming forward to us was this very motion without that information. And so this committee has certainly taken a stand on a very outspoken stand, I might say, on a couple of recent applications that we've had. So we're doing our due diligence. But I would ask, do you want to have a presentation, or are we going, but deferral is going to be moved. So the reason to have a presentation today really, in my mind, doesn't make sense if we do agree to defer it, because we're going to have a presentation at the next meeting with added information. But I still would like to ask Ms. Uhl to come and speak to us. And so let's have, and then we'll decide after that, okay? Is that good? All right. Now, we are going to have, all of us have, we've got a translator, and bienvenue.
Sorry, I do speak English, and I did write up a one-page or two-page summary for you.
Oh.
I did bring pictures
Siri,
along.
If you want to speak en français,
I'm sorry?
we're fully prepared.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm fine. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, can you put the aerial views here? I did bring pictures because pictures are worth 1,000 words. I represent the Sisters of Charity of Ottawa. I'm executive director. We appreciate this opportunity to be heard in support of the demolishment of the building there. You can see it. It is a building that is located between a private residence, a convent for nuns, and the original, or the, it's a sub-building between two buildings, kind of say. The aerial view we see here is from the Mother House on Bruyere. This building is almost at the edge of Sussex, so it's a conservation area. Buildings like this don't have, I think, their place. They've been abandoned for years. And at one time, there were apparently there were rentals there, and it's just abandoned, not heated, and you'll see in other pictures in what kind of state that building is really. For the past 168 years, the Sisters have been a proud corporate and humanitarian citizen in helping the needy and undergoing preventive maintenance of their own buildings and land they are fortunate to own. We want this opportunity to file this record. We want this on record, and the pictures as well, demonstrating the state of our neighbor's property, as we felt urgent, to bring to our councilors' attention in April 2012, because it is a definite fire hazard building up between about 6 inches of building between our garage, our fire system, heating system, right against that building. So the safety of our sisters that live there is jeopardized. At the time, the city was issuing fines and warnings in their battle against fire hazards. But right now, they're busier, I'm sorry to say, issuing traffic tickets than being concerned about the safety and the hazard of this building. The abandoned building has become a shelter for rodents of all sorts. We have counted up to 12 or 14 raccoons early this season, and now it's a nest for squirrels as well, and you'll see that in some pictures. The sisters can't even sit in their yard or do any gardening, so much these raccoons and squirrels are invasive. They don't even want to walk to their car without turning their head back, because, as you see, the building is just tearing apart. Even the structure of the building in the middle is almost due to collapse. So I don't think we need an engineering report as rebuilding or upgrading this building is just not possible. We would support the city's efforts to destroy the building. We fear for the integrity of our own buildings if there was any work, so I don't know if in the bylaws you do expect to address compensation or some sort of a warranty, not a warranty, but a guarantee to neighbors that their property would not be destroyed or damaged. This is an area, as I said, where there are landmarks, the Canadian Mint, our Mother House, and the church right around the corner there. So we believe the reconstruction in such a narrow area would be intrusive. We wouldn't be against it, but we would need some type of security that our buildings and property would not be depreciated in addressing a demolition of this sort in an interior yard. And it's unfair that properties like this be kept when it jeopardizes our own use of our own property, our own enjoyment. We're afraid of even walking beside the building on a windy day. As you see, debris are over the roofs, all about, and flying everywhere. And now it's fall. So we're in our third year of pressuring our councillor to do something about this because it is a safety hazard, and we're so afraid for fire. Our building is right against it, and our heating system piping as well. So we would appreciate something be done about this sooner than later. Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming, and you've given the real picture of the situation, and I just can't imagine these sisters living in that kind of situation with just the animals all over.
The animals.
That's crazy.
It's scary. They just turning around every day. They're there. They're everywhere. They're nesting in this property.
It doesn't look like a fixer-upper from the picture.
No way. I can't imagine that's possible there.
So
it's total loss.
We now have a couple of other speakers as well, but I wanted to say that we're going to deal with this as quickly as we can, but we are doing our best to have all the information possible before us. What you've brought today is certainly something that adds to that information. So what's the estimated time for the information to come back on the, Leslie?
Through you, Madam Chair, we have requested an engineering study from the property owner, as is typical when we have a proposed demolition in a heritage conservation district where there is no replacement building. I am not sure that the property owner is willing to provide that document, so we are trying to work with them to do so. That being said, Sally and I just realized that since our agenda clearing meeting where it was discussed that this should maybe be deferred in light of the lack of an engineering study, the October 22nd Planning Committee meeting is now only for the official plan. So that means that our 90 days will run out if this gets deferred to the October meeting of the Built Heritage Subcommittee, because it won't be able to go to Planning Committee until November, and the 90 days runs out on October the 30th. If the 90 days runs out, this is deemed to be approved.
Demolition.
Yes.
I have a, yes, Councillor Clark. Just stay there for a minute. Thank you.
Now, Leslie, this demolition, is it in view of trying to build something on the site?
No.
It doesn't say so in the report, and that's why I need to...
No, there would be no replacement building because it would not be permitted under the current zoning bylaw.
That would be my view of it, too. So what I'm really wondering is why would it not be included in the report so that I wouldn't have to ask this question?
I believe it was included in the very beginning of the report. Under the first paragraph of discussion, it says, no new building is proposed on the site as it would not be in compliance with the City of Ottawa zoning bylaw.
You were fast reading, speed reading. Yeah, I had to. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Councillor Moffat?
Maybe I'm missing something. What exactly are we waiting for then?
Exactly. We'll have that discussion. We have two more speakers to speak to it. I'll tell you that I didn't realize that we weren't in a position to make sure that we did have that report. So really what I think you said is that we can pressure, we can ask, we can say that you must give us this report, but that person doesn't, the owner doesn't have to do that. why would there not be a mechanism, aside from heritage or anything, that requires that kind of scrutiny and proof before a demolition permit is granted for any kind of building in the city?
Well, my understanding is that if you wish to demolish your building and you're permitted to do so, then you can do it even if it was built last year. If you built a house last year and you decided this year you wanted to tear it down and build a new one, you know, provided you comply with all the zoning bylaws, et cetera, I don't think there's any reason that you wouldn't get a demolition permit.
Isn't it a good thing we treat trees better than we do that, then? Our tree policy is much stronger. Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have a question for Ms. Uhl? Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Stay tuned.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Podolsky?
Just a question related to the inability to get the owner to commission a structural engineering report. Can the Property Standards Department actually go and do an inspection, or have they done it already and provided a report?
Through you, Madam Chair, there have been a number of orders issued on the property through property standards. My understanding is that they have not been complied with. So presumably they have done a number of inspections over time. But that could be an option, I guess. But the issue we're dealing with here is that if this is deferred today, and unless it can go to the October 22nd Planning Committee, which I understand it cannot, because the item on the agenda is the official plan, it will be deemed to be approved if the 90 days expires. So.
Okay. All right. We have two other speakers. First up is David Jeans. David? We haven't moved deferral yet, right?
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I'm just speaking as an individual with an interest in the area, and in light of the very eloquent presentation that you've just had and the dilemma that you face, there may not be much point in my point was just that there are indications that there were a number of buildings like this on the fire insurance plans between 1902 and 1912. There are about 14 backyard residences like this that were identified, and it would be interesting to have a more complete study perhaps of this particular type of apparently working class infill housing, but that's an academic issue when you're faced with the very serious safety problems that have been outlined. So I think anything further that I need to say, I could just communicate to staff and leave it at that.
Thank you very much. And after we have our next speaker, is it David Fleming? Mr. Fleming? Oh. And did you want to ask it of Mr. Jeans? Of staff? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Member Quinn.
Just on that point, Mr. Jeans mentioned at the turn of the 20th century there were 14 examples of this type of housing. Is this the only one left, or are there others in the area?
I'm not actually quite sure. I mean, the only point I would make is that this wasn't infill, as this predates the house that's at the front. So it's more that the house at the front is representative of the additive nature of the way that Lower Town developed. I think there are some others, but I wouldn't want to be quoted on it. I'm not sure if you know.
Certainly there was one incorporated into a development at Geeg and Dalhousie a few years ago. There are, I don't have an exact list, but there are some that still exist.
Just to hang on a second, Mr. Fleming. So for the committee, since there may be a change in the direction we're going, I want you to think about, while we're listening to Mr. Fleming, about having, whether you want a presentation after he speaks. The presentation the staff's prepared to give, or if you don't need that, that's fine, but just think about it. Mr. Fleming, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm representing Leslie Maitland, our president, who has already sent you a letter outlining our position on this. the heritage planners just mentioned the fact that there are in fact other buildings like this. I think there's one further west on St. Andrews Street, and a number of others. I walk around that area from time to time, and you can see other buildings in back that look like they used to be houses. And I guess that's the point that we would like to make, that this is really quite an important and interesting aspect of the built heritage of Lower Town. The fact that there were multiple houses on the lots, and they occurred, as David Jean said, they're shown on the insurance maps, and it was an integral part of how communities like this developed. Sometimes looking at a building like this, the glass is either half full or half empty, and we had examples like this in Ottawa with 4, 5, 6 Lansdowne North, Somerset House, where you would get one structural engineer and say, oh yeah, the building's got to be demolished, but somebody who has experience at heritage restoration would look at it and say, well, it has some potential, it's going to take a bit of work. And I guess what we would like is just that the city take a second look at this. A good example of this kind of development occurs in Halifax, a place called Schmidtville. And I was on the board of the Heritage Trust of Nova Scotia, and people were ready to raise that entire community, which had a lot of houses in backyards of existing houses. And the developer of that particular area, which it took 15 years for them to develop it, just won a Heritage Award from the Heritage Trust of Nova Scotia. And he, in fact, lives in one of these houses that is in the backyard of one that is that fronts on the street. So you know, it's not impossible to integrate buildings like this. You know, I certainly share the concerns of the first speaker about the animals getting in there, and the fact that the building has been neglected. And it's unfortunate that even though the city property standards people did issue orders against this, that nothing seems to have happened to do it. You know, I look at this place and I look at one of the buildings in Schmidtville that I remember looking at about 30 years ago, and this is in pretty good shape. So it is possible. It depends on your point of view. And I guess what we would like is just the city to look at this whole concept of having multiple houses on the lots. And it would be a nightmare for city planners to how you fix this in the zoning, but sometimes it's not bad that planners have nightmares. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for coming to represent Heritage Ottawa. And we did receive the correspondence from Ms. Maitland, and I know that, I don't know where it went now, but it said that they do prefer to keep, thank you, they do prefer to keep the property and actually invest in the fact it's so neglected, to invest in the building, but unless the building is unsafe, we strongly encourage it not to be demolished. So really glad that the three of you came out today, because you've put a different picture, I think, a different face on the subject matter for sure. Does anybody have anything to say? Do you want to have a presentation?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question I think that is in the back of my mind, which concerns me the most, isn't so much whether the building can be saved, because we may get a report saying it can't be saved. My concern is that the owner of this building has clearly ignored the requests of the city to maintain it. And if we have a bylaw that says that we want buildings to be maintained and we don't let them to be vacant, and the owner ignores the request that we do something, and to the extent that the building then becomes a candidate, as this one clearly appears to be, for demolition, and we allow him to demolish it, we've then just pulled the rug out from under ourselves. I mean, even if they come back and say, yes, this building has to be demolished, the owner has won. And we've lost in terms of any hope we have of telling people that they have to maintain these buildings. The first thing that is blatantly obvious about this building is it's missing a roof. So that roof has been in that state for, I would say, 20 years or so at least. And had the roof been put on it, all of these other problems probably wouldn't exist there. So if we say an engineer goes in and says, yes, the place is in terrible shape and it should be demolished, all we've done is said, fine, don't maintain your buildings.
Except that's what's changing with, and the Ms. Anderson and the work she's doing. Now, that goes to on September 19th to Community and Protective Services. Then that's going to go to council, okay? And that's why, I mean, if you remember back several months ago, possibly April, May, when the mayor took a very strong stance on derelict buildings and was vocal about it and very forthright about where we were going to go as a city, that we were not going to tolerate that. That's exactly what we're talking about now. So with regard to property standards, any of the councillors around here will tell you that in our wards, property standards is a very busy department, but that it does have teeth. For example, not a heritage building not that I don't have a heritage building in Barhaven, but this one isn't. We do have we do have people that hoard, for example, okay? Twice a year, the property standards people go in, they say, you have to clean it up. If you don't clean it up within this time frame, we're going to do it, and we'll send you the bill. And this person spends about $20,000 a year because it's so bad that after the property standards go in and they say, here's your opportunity, you can fix it yourself, there is a timeline. And it's not a long timeline where we hire a team that goes in and does the work that person refused to do, and then they're forced to pay the bill. That's the same kind of thing that will happen here. So that's where the teeth comes into it. We are going to have to depend on units like this for the people that live right around it. For example, the sisters who are looking down on this to also, because if you're driving by on the street, you're not going to notice. You're flying over top, you might be in a hot air balloon or something, you say, wow, look at that place. The fact is, the average person in enforcement is not going to be driving by and is going to be alerted to that kind of condition. So I think it's going to be, one, we're raising the profile of neglected buildings and why it's important that we not allow it to happen, and two, that we are very serious and we're putting big teeth into the go forward to make sure that we don't have this continue. Oh, can I just ask, so let me just say, we don't have a motion for deferral on the floor, and so therefore we're actively speaking to this item. Trustee, I chair way too many things, you can tell. I got to start thinking about, is it a trustee, is it a member, is it a councillor? Vice Chair Podolsky.
Based on what we have heard in the last 25 minutes, I would think it would be appropriate to have a presentation by staff on this so that we get their full input into this discussion. What is become evident is that because of the 90-day period that is assigned by the Interior Heritage Act, all this discussion by the committee may be just academic, and the application will be deemed to be approved because there's no planning committee to go to. Consequently, I don't think we have any choice but to discuss it and to deal with the information that we have to date, and more may be added by the heritage staff on the condition of the building or the reasons for why demolition is being recommended. So I think that I would like to proceed with that if we can.
Yes, we can. Before we, pardon? We are going to. Yeah. That's why I asked you. Yeah. And so everybody, we want the presentation, but
Yeah, I do too.
Councillor, is that what you wanted to speak to? He wants to speak. Councillor
Just have another question. When did this owner acquire the property? Was it already abandoned when he acquired it?
I can speak to that in the presentation if you like, but...
Okay, so we're good to go with the presentation? And I actually, before we started the meeting, Councillor Kadri was telling me about property that he has that he's trying to get some attention to on Hazeldean Road. Okay.
So I will first off apologize to the committee. I don't have a very long presentation because I was thinking this was going to be deferred, so it's mostly photos, and you'll hear me talking. So this is and I don't have it in French because there's no text. This is an application to demolish 23.5 St. Andrew Street, which is located in the Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District. As you've seen from the photos already, it is located on the north side of St. Andrew Street. It is located in the rear yard of the property, and in front of it, that faces onto St. Andrew Street. This is a photo of the house. We think it was built in the 1880s. It appears on, there is a house that appears on the fire insurance plans of 1886 in the rear yard of this property. It is the only house on the property at that time. It's a wood frame building, 2.5 stories. As you can see, it's been extensively altered over its time. Doesn't have a lot of its heritage attributes left. It does have, as you saw in some of the aerial photos, which were quite helpful, I hadn't seen before, it does have a number of sort of one-story rambling additions at the side. So this gives you an idea of what you see from the street. When this application came in, staff were unaware that the building was there to a certain extent. The property owner also owns this building, as you can see, and I mean, I think this is something to consider, is that the building at the front of the property is in good condition. My understanding is that it is inhabited by the property owner. The building so this building was built later. The one at the front was built in 1910. So it sort of speaks to the nature of development of Lower Town in the late 19th and early 20th century. Just give you another view. So you can see some of the elements of the porch are still intact, but for the most part, that is really, that and the sort of form of the building are the only things that are remaining. The Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District Plan has guidelines related to demolition. Basically, it says that, in general, demolition of properties within the district will not be recommended for approval, and partial demolitions required for renovations may be acceptable if they do not remove original fabric of the building. And then finally, structures deemed to not have heritage significance may be proposed for demolition, or may be considered for demolition. So the reason that staff are recommending approval of this application is for a number of reasons. While the age of the building is significant, and it does speak to the development of land in Lower Town in the early period, the building itself has very few of its heritage attributes remaining and is in very poor condition. We have not received the engineering report, but I think it's quite obvious to the layperson even that the building has some serious issues. I'm not saying it could not be saved, but I think it would require a significant amount of effort. In addition, as the building is located in the rear yard of the property, it is not a landmark within the district. It doesn't necessarily contribute to the streetscape of St. Andrew Street, and so it is being recommended that it be approved for demolition. Just a couple of more photos. So as I mentioned, we have requested an engineering study from the property owner. I am not confident that we will receive that study, and so it would be up to the committee how they wish to proceed on the recommendation without the engineering study. Happy to answer any further questions you might have. Sorry, I'd like to just add one more thing. The Lower Town West Community Association has provided comments. They're included in the report. They don't support the demolition of the structure, as they feel that it is an example of demolition by neglect and that the character of the property is significant to the history of development in Lower Town.
Member Smallwood wants to speak to just that point.
I guess, as I mentioned before, my real concern is that this clearly is a case of somebody not maintaining a building. Will there be, I understand there were orders issued against the owner. In the event he demolishes it, in the event he's allowed to demolish it, what would happen? Will he be fined for failing to follow up on the orders that were issued before, or will he be let off without any further action? Thank you.
That is not something I can answer. That's a property standards issue. Sorry.
But for our information, for the future, and also on this file, if you could find out after the fact, he has been issued orders. I'm sure that property standards has gone back to check, because they've been there. If they've issued orders more than once, they've gone back. What has happened? Has anything happened? Has anything been enforced? Have the current rules as we have them, have they, has this place benefited from any of those actions? Has he ever received a fine? Has he ever been charged? Has he ever had to contribute money? Or is this just really a huge case example of demolition by neglect? I mean, I don't think that you're going to get a better example than that. And so could you get us that information and just send it out in an email to us for information? Okay.
Yes, I can try and do that.
Thank you. And Councillor Hobbs?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ms. Collins. You mentioned that there was not much left in terms of heritage components to this particular building, but what things were lost, or what has been lost that it wouldn't be considered a good example of heritage now?
Well, we don't have a historic photo, so I'm saying that things were lost is sort of speculation based on what I know about other buildings of this type. As you can see, I mean, the cladding has been changed. You know, there are some elements of the porch that may be older. There are obviously some elements of the porch that have been replaced. You know, this railing is likely not original. You know, there are some historic windows. This looks like it may be a historic window, but I'd say there was probably another window here, for instance. So it's hard to say exactly what's lost because we don't have that documentary evidence. So by saying that some of the heritage attributes are gone is based on my knowledge of other buildings of this type.
Okay. And in other buildings of this type, that's what you're referring to when you say there would be two windows in the front and that sort of thing, and different cladding, or?
Yeah, I mean, there may not have been two windows in the front, but there are examples where there were.
Okay.
I mean, this window's not centered, for instance. You know, it may have been, you know, the window opening may have changed. So I'm basing it on other buildings around the city. It's a fairly common building type in Ottawa. You see a lot of them in New Edinburgh. The one we looked at a couple of months back, 61 Queen Victoria, is quite similar. It's not the same, but it was a smaller version, but similar kind of gable end to the front and that sort of thing.
Okay. Because I think from my perspective, you know, if I owned this property, I would have gone out of my way to maintain this, because this is quite a nice, unique feature in the market, and you know, it's just a shame that it has been allowed to get into this state. So I just wonder, I would be supportive of the deferral to wait for the engineering report, because I would be fighting to keep this and not be approving a demolition.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Moffat?
Can you just go back and show me the picture of the street view? Yeah. So what exactly are we preserving if that building isn't demolished? I mean, nice thing about heritage buildings and architectural design is that you can see it, that it's apparent. The only thing you can see from the building neighboring it is the back of that one-story structure and the roof that's half falling apart. From the street, it's nothing. So I get maybe if this road was fronting on, if this house was actually fronting onto the road, you could actually see it when you walk by it. I could see why the argument would be there, but I just don't see a compelling argument to preserve that building and to not demolish it as soon as possible.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think, you know, staff are recommending approval of the demolition, but just for sort of the education of the committee, designation of heritage buildings is not simply about what it looks like on the outside and whether or not it's visible to the public. We generally look at, you know, the architecture, the history, and the context. So in this instance, the context is the interesting part in that because it's located in the rear yard, it represents and tells the story of the way that the pattern of land use developed in Lower Town. So while it's not visible from the street, that would be the sort of the heritage value of the property.
Councillor Moffat, that's it? Good. Okay, Member Smallwood.
Thank you. I'm still a little unclear in my mind the relationship between the actions of the buildings branch and the heritage branch. In the case of this building, their actions are not part of your report, but they are of interest to us. And I'm just wondering, are they regularly updating you? In the case of a property like this in a heritage district, would they be telling you there is a problem, we've contacted the owner's refusing to take action, and is that something that could be part of reports coming forward to us so we have some understanding of the background of what's been going on here? Thank you.
We are regularly updated on the buildings on the list that we have been discussing today and consulted on that. Other than that, when property standards or orders are issued on a property, they show on our GIS system, so we check, or we can check. But aside from the identified buildings, we are not regularly informed of property standards orders being issued throughout the city on heritage buildings. So this one we did not know. So we didn't know about this one.
Do we know how long this owner has owned the property?
Through you, Madam Chair, sorry about that, Councillor Clark. I do not know. It has been for many, many years. Like it's not a recent purchase. So I don't know the exact date, no.
Whether or not it was bought in an abandoned condition?
That I'm not aware.
Vice Chair Podolsky.
This application for a tiny little building in the rear yard of Lower Town West Heritage Conservation District has actually taken on a symbolic value in the community at large, given the effort that is now being made to prevent demolition by neglect. And so it has emerged curiously at a moment where this committee has been put into a dilemma because of the staff report to permit or to recommend demolition, and the presentation which we had just earlier from Ms. Anderson, which talked about the effort that the Property Standards Department is going to make in the future once they get the new protocols approved.
Heavily based on the fact